Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Pagan Parlor. Today is Friday, December 3rd, 2021, and I am your host, Maximilian Pensword, but you can call me Max. Here in this podcast, we will explore a variety of things related to paganism. At this point, I would like to give a notice and reminder that paganism is a broad term that envelops many different pantheons and belief systems, and as such, this podcast will be focused on paganism as a whole and not on any specific branch of it. Each episode contains a short lesson on a stone or metal, a story, myth, or legend, and a segment which I like to call Keeping Up with the Christians, which you will hopefully find amusing as well as informative on what the Christians are up to lately. Now, since we are all busy people, we'll jump straight in with a quick ritual. This ritual is intended to join the energies of the listeners in with the energies of the host, as well as the same in reverse, as well as some basic protections against the ill intentions of others. I will now light the candle, and as I do so, I invite all beings of good energy and good intent into the ritual space. Humans and gods and goddesses alike, spirits and the fae, come and join together in good nature and to play. Come old, come young, come scarred and burned, it matters not, there's a lesson to be learned. Come in good faith and you will be safe, but come with ill intent and your mind shall get bent. Bring us together in storms and good weather, keep us from pain and from those who are sane. For the harm of none and the good of many, we call to the gods and they are many. Blessed are we, so mote it be. This week, our lesson will be on Citrine. This week's lesson uses information that comes from Wikipedia.com and Wikipedia.org. Citrine is one of the many varieties of quartz crystals. The crystal has a color ranging from a pale yellow to a brown. Naturally occurring citrines are rare, and as such, most commercially available citrines are standard quartz that has been heat treated. These stones can be identified by small lines within the crystal, as opposed to the cloudy appearance of natural citrine. This stone has been referred to as merchant stone or money stone due to the belief that it brings prosperity. This stone can be found in Brazil, Russia, Madagascar, and France. Additionally, this stone is associated with both the planet and the god by the name of Mercury, the element of air, and the solar plexus chakra. Citrine can be used to increase confidence and focus as well as to help broaden the mind. Finally, the properties of bringing abundance are said to work best for those who are generous with the abundance that the stone brings. Inhalation of citrine dust can lead to a condition called silicosis, which is a type of pulmonary fibrosis. So don't be a dumbass and sand it down without wearing a breathing mask. You don't want it in your lungs. Next, we have our Pagan Promotions section. Herein, I will highlight one person of interest, celebrity, or pagan-owned business per week. Information from this week's Pagan Promotion section comes from Wikipedia.org and Starhawk.org. This week, we are taking a look at a woman who goes by the name of Starhawk. Starhawk is one of the two founders of the reclaiming tradition of contemporary American witchcraft alongside Diane Baker. She was born in 1951. She is an environmental activist and an ecofeminist, as well as being the author or co-author of 13 books, including Circle Round, which is said to be a must-have for anyone raising children within the pagan traditions. She believes that the earth is a living entity and advocates a combination of social justice and nature-based spirituality. Beyond this, she holds a bachelor's degree in the fine arts and a master's degree in psychology, so we can be sure that she is both spiritually driven as well as educated. The next section is on stories, myths, and legends. In this portion of the podcast, I will retell a legend, myth, or story related to the gods, magic, or anything else that I feel to be paganism related. Information for today's story comes from EgyptianMyths.net. This story is titled, The Prince and the Sphinx, and it comes from the Egyptian tradition. There was once an Egyptian prince by the name of Thutmose, who was the son of Amenhotep. Despite having many brothers and half-brothers, he was the pharaoh's favorite son, and so the others were forever making plots against him. These plans would normally be along the lines of making the pharaoh think that he was unworthy to succeed the throne, or making the priests believe Thutmose to be cruel or failed to honor the gods. Sometimes these plots would aim to take his very life. Because of this, Thutmose became troubled and unhappy, and so he spent less and less time in Pharaoh's court, and went with greater and greater frequency on expeditions into the desert to the 7 great oases, even alone and in disguise when need be. On one such day, Thutmose decided to escape from the pomp and pageantry at the festival of Re at Heliopolis by going to hunt at the edge of the desert, taking with him only 2 servants. As he drove his chariot, he kept going through the scrub and the sand and the stunted plants until he reached the great Libyan desert. They had decided to set out at the first glimmer of dawn, so as to give them as much time as possible before the great and oppressive heat of midday, and they followed the gazelles north over the desert for many miles, running parallel to the Nile River, while still being some miles away from it. By the time that it was too hot for them to continue hunting, Thutmose and his 2 servants had reached a point not far from the Great Pyramids of Giza, which were built by the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty over 1,200 years previous. He then made the decisions to stop under some palm trees and rest, but soon after this he wanted to be alone and to make a prayer to the god Harmachis, who was a manifestation of the god Horus that was specific to the Giza pyramids. And as such, he bid his servants to wait for him, and drove his chariot away, until he drew near to the 3 pyramids, which towered up above the sky, with the sun flashing off their golden peaks. As Thutmose gazed in awe at these man-made stone wonders, his attention was caught by a gigantic head and neck, made of stone, which rose up out of the sand in between the greatest of the pyramids, and the nearby nearly buried mortuary temple. This was the colossal carving of Harmachis, god of the rising sun, which was carved in the form of the lion, with the head of the pharaoh, which is the form he took when he had hunted down the followers of Set. The former pharaoh Khafra had caused the statue to be built of solid stone, and had bidden the sculptors to give the statue of Harmachis his own face. In the long centuries since the pharaoh Khafra was laid to rest, the sands of the desert had blown against the Sphinx until it was all but buried, and no more than its head and shoulders could be seen. Thutmose stood for a long time, gazing at the Sphinx while the midday sun beat down upon him, while making his prayer to Harmachis in order to receive the help in the troubles that beset Thutmose. Suddenly, it seemed to Thutmose that the stone statue began to stir, heaving and struggling as if trying to throw off the sand in which it was buried, and its eyes transformed, from carved lapis lazuli to true shining eyes with vision and life. Then the Sphinx spoke. It said to him in a voice great and powerful, and yet kindly as a father speaks to his son. "Look upon me, Thutmose," he said. "Look upon me, Prince of Egypt, and know that I am Harmachis, your father and the father of all pharaohs of the upper and lower lands. It does indeed rest with you to become a pharaoh and wear the double crown of south and north upon your head. It rests with you whether or not you sit on the throne of Egypt, and whether or not the people of the world come and kneel before you in homage. If you do become a pharaoh, whatever is made by the 2 lands shall be yours, alongside the tribute from all the countries of the world. In addition, you will receive long years of life and health and strength as well. I have turned my face towards you, Thutmose, and my heart is inclined to bring you good things, and so your spirit shall be wrapped in mine. But see how the sand wraps in around me, smothering me, holding me down, hiding me from your eyes. If you perform the task of a good son to a father and free me from this sand, I will make you great." As Harmachis finished speaking, Thutmose stepped forward, and suddenly the sun shined from the eyes of Harmachis and dazzled Thutmose, so much so that the world went black and he spun around and tripped. When he recovered his vision, the sun was sinking low and the shadow of the Sphinx lay over him. He slowly rose to his feet, and the vision he had seen came rushing back into his mind as he gazed again upon the great Sphinx hidden in the sand. Suddenly he cried out, "Harmachis, my father, I call upon you and all the gods of Egypt to bear witness to my oath. If I become pharaoh, my first act will be to free this image of you from the sand, and build a shrine to you, with the story set in stone of your command and how I have fulfilled it." After this, Thutmose returned to his chariot, and he retrieved his servants from the palm trees where he had left them, before riding back to Heliopolis. After that, everything went well for him, and he was soon proclaimed by Pharaoh Amenhotep to be his heir to the throne, and before long, Thutmose did indeed become one of the greatest kings of Egypt. Now let's move on to the next segment, which I like to call Keeping Up with the Christians. In this segment, I take a look at what the Christians are doing lately and dissect it from a non-Christian's point of view. Part of this is just a report on their goings-on, and part of it's making fun of them, so I hope you enjoy it. This week in Keeping Up with the Christians. According to an article on Newsweek.com, a televangelist by the name of Marcus Lamb died from COVID. Now, generally speaking, I wouldn't bother to mock the death of any person, but the sheer irony of this one is enough to make the cut. Marcus Lamb was a televangelist and a founder of Daystar Television Network. Mr. Lamb was known for his strong stance against vaccines, even going so far as to call them a sin against God and claiming to be taking ivermectin to prevent infection. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I think a televangelist who says that one type of medicine is a sin, while taking another, dying from the thing that the sinful medicine was supposed to prevent, is a bit amusing. On the other hand, maybe his God was simply pleased with his services and wanted to call him early to his eternal enslavement, salvation. In other news, from the same Newsweek.com, a Christian man is claiming persecution after he was fired for his remarks regarding the religious apparel of a Muslim woman. Despite comparing her head wrap to Darth Vader's helmet and saying that her outward appearance was enough to frighten children and animals, the Christian, a 66-year-old male by the name of Brian Walker, is claiming that he was unfairly investigated because of a number of colleagues complaining about his discussions of same-sex marriages going against his religious beliefs. Now, I'm no genius, but I think it's pretty easy to tell that this guy has a few screws loose in his head. Only somebody drunk on the Jesus juice could possibly believe that telling people that their lifestyle is a sin and comparing their appearance to fictional villains, as well as calling them scary, is not grounds for termination from a company, and only someone who has been smoking the communion wafers could possibly believe that they have been wronged and treated unjustly when it happened. Meanwhile, a priest that served in Dayton and Cincinnati has pled guilty to multiple counts of rape of an altar boy during the 1980s and 1990s. This article comes from DaytonDailyNews.com. Drew, 59, is or was the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, Ohio, and after giving a guilty plea to all 9 counts against him, he will serve only 7 years in prison. What action has the Catholic Church taken in response to this? They have gone with their standard action and placed him on administrative leave, which makes sense as he can't very well preach from within a prison cell. Still, only 7 years for multiple counts of rape against a 10-year-old boy does not seem quite right to me. But then, the pagan gods seem a bit more decisive about how to deal with pedophiles and rapists, like when Athena gave Medusa the power to turn people to stone that looked at her so that she could never be raped again. Well, that's it for Keeping Up with the Christians for today. Tune in next week to find out the latest Christian drama. Now it's time for audience Q&A. This week, I didn't have any questions or comments sent into the podcast's email, and while I did have a couple of people mention a question to me in person, those questions managed to slip my mind for the time being, so hopefully they can be addressed in future episodes. To anyone who wants to chime in, if you want to ask questions, leave a comment or suggestion or content suggestions, or even just send me a death threat because you're a butthurt Christian and you can't stand to hear me talking smack about your religion, please feel free to send them to me at paganparlor1313@gmail.com. Again, that's paganparlor1313@gmail.com. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you for tuning into the Pagan Parlor. Again, any questions, comments, suggestions, or death threats can be sent to paganparlor1313@gmail.com. The whole of the law shall be do as thou wilt, but harm none. Blessed be. And don't forget to blow out your candles.